Now, as always, I'll start this out with a spoiler warning. If you don't want anything ruined from the latest episode of Clone Wars, which in this case is called Victory and Death, it is a really good time to click away. That said, let's talk about the end of the Siege of Mandalore story arc and the end of the Clone Wars series. And though I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from this episode, it was more or less what I figured it might be. It felt a lot like the action-packed and climactic ending of a movie, which I clearly think this arc was treated as. There was just tons and tons of action here in the final act of the story, wrapped around a few very cool or noteworthy moments that I'll talk about in a bit, before we were brought to our final resolution, which was basically showing how Ahsoka, Rex, and Maul all got away to be seen again in Rebels eventually, and to also perhaps explain why Darth Vader is seemingly not hunting down Ahsoka, why he seems to be surprised that she's still alive when he senses her many years later as, again, seen in Rebels. And speaking of Ahsoka and action, I've already heard from a few people that thought maybe she was a bit too much in this episode, that she's fending off dozens of clones time and time again. Meanwhile, other Jedi across the galaxy, and some are Jedi Masters, got taken down much, much easier by the clones. And yeah, maybe she is a bit much here. But first of all, as I've argued before, though this is an anthology-style show, if there is a main character in it, it's gotta be Ahsoka. And certainly she was the main character of this particular arc, and the previous one. And so I don't really have an issue with the main character of a story kicking a little ass and being the hero, as long as they earn it and take some lumps along the way. And certainly Ahsoka has taken her lumps in previous seasons and earned this payoff. Not to mention, as she herself basically laments in the previous episode, since she's been a Padawan, all she's been is a soldier. For a couple of years, it was one battle after the next for her, and she's been with Anakin, who isn't one to sit back, but instead likes to get in there. In other words, she's got the experience. There's also the fact that, unlike some of the other Jedi, she did get that couple extra seconds. She got that hesitation out of Rex, which I truly believe saved her life. If that doesn't happen, if Rex instead turns around and just opens fire on her, I think she's dead, plain and simple. So again here, maybe she was a bit much. It didn't bug me, and you do have to kind of expect her to be very heroic and impressive at the culmination of her story arc after 7 seasons. Still, if you don't like it, I won't claim you can't handle female characters or anything ridiculous like that. I can certainly see your point, and we can just agree to disagree without turning this into something more than just a discussion about a character in a story. Anyway, moving on to Rex a bit, I initially found it almost off-putting, I guess you could say, or out of character, that Rex was so gung-ho when taking out the other clones, that he questioned Ahsoka when she insisted they not be killed, where Rex argued they weren't doing them the same courtesy. But then she takes his helmet off and there's tears in Rex's eyes, and you realize just how much this is tearing him apart, that he's racked by this guilt over what he tried to do and what his brothers are currently doing, and that he's still, in a sense, trying to be a good soldier, the only thing he's ever really known. And it probably terrifies him somewhere deep down that he's going to have to leave this all behind, that he's going to have to leave them, his brothers, behind. And so I think they ended up playing this perfectly, and it was an awesome moment. Another awesome moment was round 2 of Maul showing off. I thought his hallway scene last episode, which was arguably more impressive than Vader's in Rogue One, was one thing, but mowing down even more clones before using the Force to rip the hyperdrive apart was another. I mean, this too was borderline too much, but again, this episode was all about the conclusion of not only this great story arc, but of this amazing series overall, and I'm glad the last part here was a true spectacle. And though I don't think this was the best episode of the arc, it may have had the coolest moment of the arc at the end, but I don't think it was the best overall. In fact, it was probably the weakest, which is not meant to be a slight in the least, especially when you consider these 4 episodes really should just be merged together and seen as one story or movie. And when looked at in that respect, again, this was a great, intense, action-packed finale that had a chilling and haunting final scene, one that I think ended the series or show exactly how it should have. I mean, it basically all begins with Ahsoka entering Anakin's life and it being the last thing he wanted. He had no interest in taking on a Padawan. It then ends with him losing her, after of course he'd grown so attached to her. And the irony is that what she was supposed to teach him in the first place was letting go. which is arguably the one thing, his inability to let go, that stopped Anakin from being the greatest of all Jedi, and instead led him to become one of the most powerful Sith ever. It's a truly perfect, hauntingly beautiful way to end this show, and I loved that you could see Anakin's eye behind the helmet as he looked at the lightsaber, as well as the fact that Morai, that's the convor or bird you see circling, was really selling it for Ahsoka that she was dead. And of course, Morai is basically from the Mortis story arc, and is, you could say, essentially the spirit or maybe an avatar of the daughter that gave her life to save Ahsoka. And so again, Anakin, or Vader in this case, seeing this convor circle, helps really sell the fact that Ahsoka is dead, and her body is buried somewhere in the snow and ice. Which is also part of the reason why she left her lightsaber behind, to further sell it. However, there's more to it than that, because she also left behind her life as a Jedi, because even though she tried all she could to save the lives of the clones, or at least not kill them, so many of them still died, and they died wearing those helmets to honor her. And as she's looking at these graves, she's reminded of everything her life as a Jedi, or coming back to it, has amounted to in the end, which is a galaxy controlled by the Empire and or Sith, not to mention Maul is still out there thanks to her, and a bunch of dead, soon-to-be-forgotten clones. And that gets highlighted by the fact that in the very next scene, after what I think is meant to imply perhaps a season on the planet has gone by, since it's now iced over and snowing, that the clones have already been replaced by stormtroopers. Sure, it could certainly be that more time has gone by, or even less, I suppose, but I really think part of the idea here is to show just how disposable the clones were in the end. And they are, of course, some of the greatest victims of this war, created to serve Jedi generals that they were actually meant to betray all along, and then discarded when that purpose is completed. And this does, in a sense, or vaguely, and I was kind of talking about this in a video the other day, line up with the events in the Ahsoka novel, where she leaves her lightsaber behind at a grave to kind of sell the fact that she's dead, and that Rex is dead too, so that the Empire maybe doesn't come looking for them. And here in this episode, again, I think Vader believes she has died. And it'd be curious if this isn't long after everything that went down with Order 66 and the fall of Anakin, what Vader would do if maybe he'd found evidence that Ahsoka was still alive. Is he so far gone already that he'd hunt her down to kill her, or maybe even seek out a new dark side apprentice? Or is there still a shred of Anakin in there that maybe would have been able to use Ahsoka still being alive to fight against Vader? So in an odd sort of way, Ahsoka doing this, though she had no clue, this was likely the last nail in Anakin's coffin, if you will. So all in all here, though maybe not the best episode of the arc itself as a whole is the best one in the entire Clone Wars series, hands down in my opinion. And as I've been saying in the previous reviews, this has been some of the best Star Wars ever. Not only has it looked incredible, this show visually has come so far since that opening movie and first few seasons, and not only has the music been just perfect, but the story has rivaled damn near anything else Star Wars has ever had to offer. And though it kind of sucks that this show is coming to an end, especially now that we've gotten a glimpse at what Vader looks like in Clone Wars style animation, not to mention that look at the menacing Grievous a few episodes back, I think the real tragedy would be for them, meaning Lucasfilm, to not build on this success. We know with almost absolute certainty there will be another animated show in the future. It's probably long since been in development and will likely be announced any time, I'd imagine. So please, whatever it is, tell me you built off this success, off everything this show accomplished. Don't throw this animation style away and start from scratch again like you did with Rebels and Resistance. In my opinion, this style works extremely well for Star Wars, maybe even in some respects better than live action, which I know might sound like blasphemy. But some of the Force powers, like the very acrobatic stuff, looks far more natural in animation than live action. And I'm certainly not saying move away from live action altogether, not by a long shot. I'm just saying embrace this. Make animation a big part of the future of this franchise. There is a whole generation out there, the one that grew up with the Clone Wars, that thinks of this as Star Wars. And most of us older fans love it too, other than those few out there who can't think of this as anything but a cartoon, and I do pity them because they don't know what they're missing. Anyway, as I said, whatever is next for Star Wars animation has no doubt long since been in the works, and after this, after what you accomplished with the Siege of Mandalore, it'd be hard to go back to watching something that looks like Resistance. And I really hope you all at Lucasfilm realize that. Star Wars has always been about innovation, so please do that with the next series. In closing here, I could probably continue to rattle off more superlatives about this episode and story arc, but I'll refrain and just say that The Siege of Mandalore is Star Wars at its finest. This was a perfect ending to the Clone Wars. I wouldn't add or change or take away a thing, and usually I always do find something to nitpick about, but not this time. And to me, this along with The Mandalorian is proof that Star Wars is not dead, not when it's put in the hands of the right people. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this last episode and the Siege of Mandalore arc overall. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.